have unlocked the eternal link to internal source, the key of imagination, your admission, access to the enlightened dimension. A gateway at the junction of darkness and light, the place at which the chaos of our conditioned frame of mind give way to a life in constant flux, only to be mastered through vigilant discipline. Peaceful times may come, testing times may go. This is the Ebb and Flow.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Eben and Flow podcast. It's great to be with you all today. Man, I'm so stoked for our guest today, the Herbal Chef himself, Chris Sayegh. Man, it's so good to be with you, brother.
Likewise. I very much enjoy all of our times together, and this is no different. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. And I really appreciate you inviting me on your podcast that we recorded a couple weeks ago. And
yeah, about to release that. I'm very excited.
Awesome. And you know, in this very difficult time, it's so good to form or to feel the alliances, you know, with like-minded individuals and brothers in arms, as it would be. And so I really feel that way about you, man. And I feel like you're definitely a soul brother of mine. So I'm very excited to have you download my audience on your life experience, your insight, your knowledge. And so, as we were saying before I hit the record button on this deal, I have been very interested in bringing people into recognition of their intuition and our abilities as human beings to tap into deeper truths within ourselves to help us on the way to realizing our destiny. And your story is such a profound example of that. And so I think it would be best for this conversation for us to begin with you telling your story to my audience so they can get a feel for this idea and so that they can have an idea of how to do this in their own lives, or what this feeling, this sensation is of following your intuition, your instincts, your gut, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Being divinely inspired, as it were.
Yeah, and divinely led. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that introduction. Thank you. And I feel the very same way, man. I hope you know that. I have so much deep respect for you and your ability to reflect on your life and the path that you saw yourself on, and then the path that you chose by following that inner instinct. And in a lot of ways, I think we have a relatable story. But I originally, I come from a very traditional Middle Eastern background. So, you know, I grew up with tables of minsef and waragdawali and kusa and, you know, just all sorts of incredible Middle Eastern dishes. And then my entire ginormous family around all the time. And everyone's very opinionated and everyone has a very strict way of doing things. And in this Middle Eastern culture, you really only have you know, a couple different ways of being successful. You're either a doctor or you're a lawyer. And that's really it. Beyond that, like nothing else exists, you know? And so I had originally gone to, I had the opportunity to further my career in baseball and football. And I was getting scouted and I had a couple scholarship opportunities, and ultimately, I got, you know, a scholarship opportunity to like NYU, and I got a scholarship to a couple different, you know, areas for football, and then I got into UC Santa Cruz. And ultimately, I like had this epiphany that ultimately, I didn't want to I didn't want to hurt myself. Like I knew that if I continued down professional sports, and I knew that if I kept throwing out my arm, that it was going to lead to surgery, and then it would lead to like me not being able to fully utilize my body.
Mm.
And I was worried. I was worried about how that might affect the rest of my life and everything else inside of that. I'm going to pause just for a second.
Yeah.
Can you hear that in the background?
The ringing, yeah.
Okay.
It's okay.
Is it in the way? I can, let me just turn off the system.
Yeah, it's all good, brother. Pausing for a moment.
My apologies.
It's all good, man.
I forget that I'm at my parents' house and they have a very loud, obnoxious home phone still.
They have a landline?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
I know. My apologies, guys. So essentially, I realized that I really didn't, like, I wanted to use my brain more than I wanted to use anything else in my body. And I love being physical. I love being active. But ultimately, I knew what was going to happen. It's inevitable. If I'm throwing 92 miles per hour and I consistently do that for years on end, there's bound to be, injuries that result from that. So I got into UC Santa Cruz. I toured the campus and I was like blown away. And they had a robust science school. Like they're known for their science. They're known for astronomy. They're known for biology, etc. And so what I was going to do is go there. I was going to get my undergraduate, go to medical school, and become a doctor because that was drilled into me. And at some point there, I just wanted to get out of being anywhere near my family, because I love them and I love being around them. And I think that there's been so many beautiful things that they've taught me, and I've grown as a man. I've grown, in so many different respects because of my family. And I genuinely appreciate the tradition that they've instilled, the love that they've instilled, the hardships that they've made me face, all the self-responsibility that they've instilled, etc. So this is not to say, anything bad about them, but really you just need to get the fuck out of the house sometimes. And you need to escape whatever, frequency is invading your space.
No doubt.
And that's what I did. So I went to UC Santa Cruz and I was like, you know what? I'm done with baseball, done with football. This is going to be it for me. And it wasn't exactly true because I still played sports and I just needed to be active. I missed it a lot. The physical contact, etc. It like fueled my spirit as well. That's something that's still a big part of my life is physical contact. And like being with my brothers and being with like people that I can, be really in my masculine power with, and not seen as a threat and not seen as a, being egotistical or being arrogant or just really being in your masculine power. But I get there and, the first 2 years were a dream. I literally have no bad things to say about anything that happened in those 2 years. I had the time of my life. I made lifelong friends that I still keep in touch with on the regular. I had as much fun as one could possibly have. And I tried, while I was there, many different psychedelics because ultimately I was looking for answers. And I'd always felt a deep sense of connection to myself and a deep sense that I can do more and that there is more. And I took this time and really just went all out. I tried everything that I could. The first experience that I had was actually with DMT. And then the first experience I had was with a low dose mushroom. And then it was DMT. Then it was LSD. Then it was mushrooms again. And then it was, I just kept trying things when it felt right. And one of the experiences left me with psilocybin, left me with this incredible burning, like this burning in my heart. I don't know how else to describe it. Essentially, we went out to this beautiful meadow in Pogonip up in Santa Cruz, and we were all tripping that day. And it was absolutely beyond anything that I could have imagined. It was, it just felt serene. It felt like absolutely I should have been there. That was my time to be there with those people at that time. Everything was synchronistic. And I had this deep understanding that ultimately, in order for me to be happy and in order for me to live a life that I can die with true peace in my heart and accomplish what I came here to accomplish, that I would have to take radical responsibility for everything that happened in my life. And that ultimately that led me to understand that the path that I was currently on was not due to my own volition. It was due to outside forces exercising their will on me. And that I was not involved in the choice, or I was involved in the choice, but it was more that I was complicit in it rather than I chose it myself. So upon that realization, as I'm like hugging a tree, crying, like deep in it, I just realized that I needed to change my life immediately, that if there was literally no time to waste. And I sort of got a little anxious, and I was like, holy shit, like if there's no time to waste, like then that means that I've wasted my time. And then it took me a long time to work through everything, because those downloads, they have so many layers to them, and you couldn't possibly truly get it at the first run. Like there's certain things that from my ayahuasca trip or from my DMT trip or from my psilocybin trips that still download over 6 months, a year later. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what it meant. And this is one of those things that one of the things was that I didn't waste my time at all. In fact, that was how I was going to lead to my path and how I was going to become who I always had wanted to be and who I was hoping that I was. And when I woke up the next day, I literally had this fire in me that I knew was there, but I had never felt like this. And I literally I sat there in the my college house, and I'm looking at this giant painting of our friend who is like, has his shirt off and he's a little bit chubby. Like somebody painted a 6 foot by 4, like 5 foot painting of our friend wrestling a bull half naked. And it was like, I remember it clear as day that I'm sitting there watching this thing. And I'm like, I have to go right now. And I went and I called my mom. And that was the first call that I made. And I was like, Mom, I have to tell you something. I need to leave. I need to go pursue what is going to make me happy. And I think what's going to make me happy is cooking for people. I really love to make people happy through food. And I think that there is healing in everything that we eat. And I want to create something that helps the world be better and help the world. I don't want to just do one thing. I want to help the entire world as much as I can.
I don't want to cut you off, but
Don't worry.
Cooking and creating beautiful meals for people that change the way they think about the world. Was that part of this? How did that come into your realization?
Well, this is the part why I mentioned my family. because I started to reflect on all the times in my life that I was truly joyous, that I really like had joy in my heart. I had little conflict, and I was just truly happy. And every single time I was with my friends, I was with my family, and I was eating food. Every single time. It didn't matter like how cool something was, or like, you know, all those memories are still there. But the first memories that I ever thought of were being with my family and eating with my friends and family, and cooking with my grandmother, and, you know, all of this real like instances that, you know, helped me understand who I truly was and really what was making me happy. So that was how I realized, like, I need to do that. I need to be able, and, you know, another realization that I had was, I was like, I'm eating this shitty cafeteria food that if I don't have my mother's and my grandmother's fucking malfouf ever again in my life, I'm going to die. I'm going to literally lose my mind. Like I need to be able to have that. And I realized that if no one was going to carry on those traditions, I was going to do it. And then all of a sudden, synchronistically, I realized that all of it was meant for me. Like it was there for me. And I just didn't put it together until I had been able to step outside of my current worldview and then realize, you know, what was the abundance around me that I had to actually choose from. And I say choose because ultimately your path is your choice. Like you can, there's so many predetermined, or there's so much talk about predetermination, but in reality, you are co-creating your reality with your vibration, with your frequency, with your choices. And the universe is relentlessly on your side to accomplish these things. And so it was really a choice that I had, that I wanted to fulfill my duty of helping the world through my medium being food. And that was essentially what started me off on what was a long and treacherous, you know, journey to learn how to become what now I can comfortably call myself a chef that, you know, owns a business that I'm able to make, you know, money and make people happy. And not only am I able, you know, the Japanese have a word for it. It's called ikigai. And it's, you know, what the world needs, what you can make money at, what you love, and what you're passionate about. And when you can combine all of those, you've reached ikigai. And that is what I have found. I thought about it and I was like, how do I want all of this to happen? And I designed in my mind what the perfect job would be. And within 3 years, I'd say that I was doing exactly what I had envisioned. Not to the extent that there was no more room for improvement and no more room that I wanted to grow, but to the extent that I looked back at one point in, you know, that was in 2012. And then in one point after that, I looked back and I was like, oh my God, I did the things that I wanted to do. And now I'm learning from, incredible chefs, and I'm learning from people from around the world. And I'm doing things that I never would have, you know, really thought that I would do.
It's amazing, dude. So did you say what your mother said to you when you told her you were leaving?
No, she was bawling. Like, how could you do this? You're throwing away your life.
Yeah.
Please don't do it. Like fucking crazy. But you know, you got to feel for her too.
For sure.
She's coming from an old school mentality where there's only a few jobs that are going to make money that, you know, live a good life. Yeah. She wants that for me. So, but she literally would call me every single day crying, asking me to reconsider. And I was like, Mom, you don't get it. You don't get it. This is not about you. You don't have to live my life. You don't have to wake up in the morning and live with my decisions. I do. And therefore you have no power in this. And I basically cut myself off from any monetary value that I was receiving from anybody. And at that point, my parents I moved back home so that I could figure out my job situation and, what I wanted to do, because I was going to go to culinary school and I was going to take out a loan for that. And basically the chef that I met with of a 2 Michelin star restaurant in LA, he told me, he's like, don't fucking waste your money. You're going to waste your money. Come into the kitchen, see if you even like it. And so I did. I came in the next day and I fell in love. I was at home. Like, I loved every part of it. And I worked for free for months. My parents had found out that I consumed cannabis. And as we talked about in the podcast that I had you on for Of Earth, there was, like, I was using it to regulate my system so that I could have an actual, I could go to bed at a certain time. I could eat food while I was also taking Concerta and all of these other things. And at that time, I was using cannabis in a really responsible way for the most part. And I also had my medical card. My parents find this medical card and they go ballistic. And I'm like, I don't want to go to jail for having a fucking joint on me. So this is why I got my medical card. And I use it often and for these reasons. And they just one ear threw out the other. And so I essentially got kicked out of the house. And I was living in my car in Upper West LA, and I was working 14 to 16 hours a day, going into my car, sleeping, getting up, and then going and doing it again. And I was like so determined that I had, like I told you, every day that fire was waking me up, and it was like, hey, you got shit to do. We're here for a reason. We're like, you found purpose. We're doing this. This is not a joke. This is not fake. This is not a fleeting feeling. This is something that you feel deep down is calling you, and you need to go for it. And I couldn't ever have imagined why at that time. But looking back on it, it was very clear what I had to go through. I had to go through all of that. I had to be that. What that did was make me completely self-reliant, meaning I didn't ask anything from anybody. And if I didn't have something, I didn't have it, and I had to earn it. And it got to the point where I started to get paid finally. And I started to look for an apartment, and I started to like build my life. And that was a really monumental moment for me, because I felt that I was just in the shit, like totally in the shit. And I very slowly climbed my way out of that, but never did I have doubt in my heart that I was doing the right thing. I did have doubt with what the fuck am I going to do? Where am I going to all of a sudden get all this money from that I need? Where am I going to, what if my car breaks down? How to, just all the stuff that you go through when taking that leap of faith that you genuinely have no idea. And I realized that I was expecting too much. Like, I can't expect things. I have to allow myself. Like, the way that I look at life is that we are a drop of water in a river. We have the, defining edges of the river. And that is essentially our consciousness. And we have choice within that. We are in a light beam, like the river that's flowing down, and there's no escaping that. We are in a stream right now. We are in a frequency and we are flowing. But ultimately, we have the choice. It wasn't about creating something rigid for myself and creating something so structured that you have to follow it. It was about creating a guideline of what I really wanted out of life, and then co-collaborating with the universe in making it happen.
So powerful, man. So powerful. A few things in there that I want to highlight is the external reaction, your mother, your parents, your family, your friends, everybody thinking you're fucking crazy
Oh yeah.
for leaving this preconceived idea of what a successful life was going to be. And then, which is an important thing to highlight, because as you take that leap of faith onto your destiny path, the universe tests you along the way before it gives you the fortune. Before you get to the city of gold, you have to go through the fucking jungle, you know. And so there's that. And then all of that, you know, and then the tests keep amping up. Now you're living in your car, and because you're dedicated to this, your sense of truth, this calling that's undeniable in yourself. And so the universe keeps testing you. You sure this is what you want to do? You sure this is what you want to do? And you just keep coming, and you say, yeah. You wake up every day and you're like, there's no choice for you anymore. There's no choice. And so, and then one day you wake up and you look back and you're like, whoa, I fucking did it. I fucking succeeded on this dream I had. And that's so powerful, man. You know, that's so powerful to continue to take that leap of faith. With your Middle Eastern background, there's this fantastic Sufi tale of Mojud. Have you ever heard this?
No, I don't think so.
So one of my favorite guys to listen to is Osho.
Mm-hmm.
And Osho tells the story of Mojud. And Mojud was a pretty average dude who had a well-respected job as the commissioner of weights and balances. So it's sort of like an abstract occupation that, you know,
Right.
I don't think there's much to relate to. It's like a government job today. And one day, Kidder is the Sufi center of the self. Kidder is the representation of your inner truth, your inner light. Your direct connection to spirit manifests as Kidder. And so Kidder appears to Mojud one day, and he says, you have to leave your job and go to the river. And Mojud says, all right, I guess. Are you sure? Kidder's like, yeah, leave your job, you go to the river. So that day, Mojud goes to his boss, and he says, you know what, I can't do this job anymore. I've got to go. I've been called elsewhere. So he goes to the river. Kidder appears again. He says, take off all your clothes and jump in the river. Perhaps someone will save you. Without questioning it at all, Mojud takes off all his clothes and he jumps in the river. And because he could swim, he doesn't drown, but he floats down this river for a little while. And a fisherman pulls him into his boat eventually. And Mojud starts living with the fisherman, and the fisherman teaches him how to fish and the ways of the river and how everything works in that way of life. And the fisherman doesn't know how to read or write, so Mojud teaches him these things. And he does this for 3 years. Kidder never shows up again until 3 years later. He's standing at the foot of his bed, and he says, Mojud, you've done your duty here. You're going to leave here right now, and you're going to go to this town, and there will be money for you, and you'll get a job at the grocery store. And Mojud, without skipping a beat, he gets up and he goes, and he leaves this house in the middle of the night, and he goes to this other town where Kidder instructed him to go, and he gets a job as a grocer, and there he's got money and a job provided for him. And the tale continues as Mojud sort of works his way back up the ladder of life. And the gist of the story is that when spirit, divinity, when the universe starts to take you on the path that's your destiny, at first there is no absolutes, because you have to be willing to take the leap of faith. And through taking that leap of faith, you earn the universe's trust, and the universe feeds that. And it fuels that to eventually the point where there is no possibility of failure or of falling flat on your face, because now you've given yourself completely over to God, and everything you need will be provided for you as it comes. And, you know, your life path and your destiny, and just being sensitive enough to allowing yourself to follow that. You know, it's a testament to who you are today, and the work you do, and how your life has completely blossomed into, you know, providing not only beautiful food for people around the world, but expanding the awareness and consciousness around the power of plant medicine, cannabis, psychedelics, and really giving people a way into the benefits of these medicines. Because that's sort of, you know, food is something you come to the table, and it's such a enlightening experience. It's such an open experience, because everyone enjoys good food. So
Right.
when you add in the aspect of education and something higher to take away from that experience, you can leave the dinner table, or, you know, the table in general, enlightened in a way.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at it as there are many ways to nourish one another energetically. You can give somebody a compliment. You can give somebody a high five. You can hug somebody. You can kiss somebody. You can, you know, make love. You can feed somebody. And I think that feeding somebody is the only one that nourishes them in a way that which allows them to go on and accomplish what their soul has been longing for. So we're actually giving energy to go on and spread their message and their, you know, path, to give them energy to go along their path. But you said something
I love
that is really interesting to me, because you talk about creating that trust with the universe, having, you know, buying in basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taught this in a lot of things, especially in sports. You have to buy in. You have to buy in. You have to buy in. Otherwise, the whole system doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I was accustomed to hearing that, and I didn't realize that it was directly speaking to my soul. In that I think that you create, more than anything, you create trust within yourself, trust within your own decisions. And that, in there lies freedom, because you never are beholden to something outside of yourself now. You have that power. You've cultivated that power, and in how you expressed, you cultivated that trust. And what I think happens is you now become one with that divinity. You walk within it. And you may not, you know, fly and express your divinity in the esoteric ways in which we conventionally think about it. But though that is, walking within that divinity is still divinity. There is beauty, and there is that universal God, like, or, you know, connection to God. And that is what I think, you know, whether you want to call it God, or you want to call it prana, or you want to call it, you know, source, or whatever the word that you that feels like home for you is what you are connecting to.
Yes, no doubt, man.
Yeah.
You know, that's really the issue with, that's been my issue with religion in particular, is that it's displaced man from his connection to God.
Yeah.
You know, which is really, it's such an individual relationship, you know, and we all have that inside, and we are all connected to that source of creation, of happening, that can guide us if we are available to it.
Yeah, if we are listening. Absolutely. You have to be open and receptive. Otherwise, everything seems to be completely off the table for you.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things though is I took some time, and it really hit me hard, and I had to really dive into my spirituality, because I had all these experiences, but I didn't really have the spiritual maturity to truly dissect and understand them.
Yeah.
And so I was in a mode of constant, like, trying to find out, scratching, clawing, digging in any possible way that I could to figure out where how I could find answers. And it took me a long time to realize that my spiritual journey was ignited at that moment, not that I figured it all out at that moment. And it was years, and still is years, of processing and trying to really understand the true nature of the downloads that I've been receiving, and how I want to manifest in my own life, and create that, divine connection with myself.
Yeah.
So there was, a good few years after that where I felt like a combination of, like, I trust myself, I trust my inner heart, I know where I'm going, but I'm following blindly. Like, I have no idea what's actually in front of me, but I know that I need to go this way. And that was, a part of the testing, is, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And I think that if you don't go through these things, it's impossible, not impossible, because you can achieve anything, I think, through meditation and through going inward. But I think that these are the trials and tribulations in which offer the ability to go so deep into yourself that you actually, like, truly understand these items about yourself. You truly understand that you have to trust yourself. You have to have this sense of reliability within yourself. Otherwise, it can all be taken away from you if you're always seeking outside yourself.
Yes. I think
that's where my problem with religion lies as well, is it continually pushes the agenda of seeking outside yourself to truly find peace and love and joy.
Yes.
And I don't agree with that notion. I just don't. Everybody that I've ever seen that truly loves themselves, that truly picks up on what, we can all agree that love is a, not just a word or an action, but it is an ethereal presence. It is a way of life.
Yeah.
Those that really truly understand that don't, it doesn't seem to me that they rely outside of themselves more often than not. That joy and that love and that true connection lies outside of themselves. They believe that it is within them.
Yeah. There's so much good stuff here, man. I wrote some notes because you were, so much was coming to mind as you were talking. And this is an issue of the human experience that is being revealed in such obvious ways in 2020 through this experience of, the coronavirus and other things that are happening, racial injustice issues in our country, etc. And the role of media, social media, science. It's not just religion. There's science as well. Science is becoming a religion for people.
Absolutely.
And it's people are being led down these rabbit holes of blind faith, trusting people who are compromised in the information that they're spreading.
Absolutely.
And so I was having this conversation earlier with some guys that I work with, and it's occurred to me, in the vein of what you're talking about, that I don't have any faith or trust in external sources anymore. The people, I have a great deal, I live my life with a great deal of faith and trust, and really what it comes down to is having faith in the universe, God, spirit, my higher power, my higher self, and trusting my intuition. And really from there, I mean, outside of that, everything else I take with a grain of salt, you know. And someone might say, someone who hasn't come to this in their own life might say, wow, that's really sad. You don't trust anyone, you know. but the truth of the matter is I live my life with a great deal of trust because I have cultivated this ironclad belief in myself and my intuition and my heart and in my connection with the higher power.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, something that you said right there is that you don't trust anything outside yourself. It doesn't mean that new information from outside sources don't get internalized.
Right.
It means that you have to hold it within yourself first.
Yeah.
And then you yourself, while weighing it in your heart, can decide whether that is your truth as well, or whether you believe in certain information given your life experiences. Meaning that, in a very simple example, if somebody tells you eating red meat is bad, and then you look at all of the different, you know, MDs that have come forward and talked about how iron deficiencies are plaguing, you know, Americans and beyond, and that, you know, a lot of the different things that we're eating are valuable in red meat, et cetera, et cetera. And then you look at the opposite side, and then you weigh in your heart, what does my body feel best with? Yes. And then you eat red meat and your body feels amazing. Then that is what you listen to. It is. Right. People think it's just so black and white, but it is literally years of tuning yourself into your higher power, tuning yourself into the universe, God, prana, etc.
Your physical body.
Yes. And then holding that within yourself to really weigh if you believe that that is true or not.
That's so beautifully said, dude. The other thing that came to mind as you were talking was Carl Jung, I believe, is the one who said that study without experience is meaningless, and experience without study is meaningless. So we need the two to have a whole, a complete view of our life experience.
Absolutely.
You know, and what you were saying, because this has occurred to me, is, and other things I wrote down, because I think it was such an acute observation of psychedelic downloads happening over a month, 6 months, years, things that you experience in your psychedelic experiences and your psychedelic journeys really don't make sense until other things sort of come into play and other pieces of the puzzle come in to your awareness. And, you know, I've had this experience lately. For instance, I'm reading this book, Right Use of Will. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but this morning I was reading more of it. And, you know, the two main issues that it calls into observation of our experience right now in 2020 is judgment and denial have been massive hindrances to our expression of our free will. And it starts to talk about, so then it goes into telling stories about the earliest civilizations on Earth, the land of Pan, Lemuria, and then Atlantis. And whether or not you want to believe in these places as being real or not is sort of a side issue to this whole point. But the way it discusses the land of Pan and how life apparently operated during that time, I'm reading this book and I'm thinking to myself, my God, I've had dreams that are like this. I've had dreams in my mind. I can't exactly place how it makes sense, but I've experienced what these words are saying in this book. In some past life, in some past memory, in some far distant experience of the spirit that is now known as Eben. And that's sort of been a recurring thing. you know, and it goes to that thing of study without experience is meaningless, experience without study is meaningless, because we have to get out and live our lives and experience our lives and follow our heart and follow our instincts of where life is taking us. But we also have to come back to the ancient works, but not even the ancient works, just the work of others that's been put down into books. People have taken the time to write things down. You know, and when you think about, we've just been so disillusioned. You know, people have been so disillusioned in life that we fail to recognize, or we fail to appreciate the depth and the trials and the life experiences of others, because we seem to think that we take it all for granted, you know. And when you think about what this life is, and it goes to this preconceived notions of what a successful life means, particularly in the West, in the first world. And, you know, one of our major issues right now, and this is something, I think this connects, masculinity and rites of passage. And your story, it really, this came across to me and it resonated very deeply with me, because I've been thinking about this myself. You know, we lack rites of passage in our culture, in our modern day culture. There's no, you know, in ancient tribal cultures, when young boys and girls, when you reached a certain age, you went, and there were rituals, there were ceremonies, there were things that happened. You were sent out into the forest, you were left in a cave to have an experience, you know. And so for you, talking about how you had to get the fuck out of your house, that's a totally natural sensation. I had the same thing. You know, I went off to the University of Arizona. My family was all in LA, and I could have gone to UCLA or USC, but I was like, I got to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
You know, and part of football in a way is very much provides you with a systematic rite of passage.
Yeah.
But also your experience with psychedelics, and you're diving into the plant medicine sort of intuitively.
Yeah.
Because we are seeking these rites of passage that are lacking in our culture right now. And so, you know, I'm not exact. There's no question in there. I'm really just throwing that up to you as to hear your thoughts on that, because I feel like we need to institute that. And I was listening to this guy, Robert Bly, who's an American poet. He's in his 90s now, but there's all these incredible talks he's given on masculinity, you know, and fatherhood, and how it comes down to us as parents now. The onus is on us, and not to feed our children to the machine, the giant that is television and media, which we so easily do.
And we're so easily manipulated by. You know, something that you said about how there's rite of passages in football. I think that there's different rite of passages. Like the rite of passages in our current world are really broken up. They're not a fluid rite of passage in which I believe that we would have had given, you know, an experience 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, or with Pan, Lemuria, and Atlantis, being that our life is more fluid and connected with the ether and connected with our deepest self. Where I feel now our rite of passages are broken. Because if you think about it, what happens in football is that you are essentially receiving physical rites of passage. There are a lot in, you know, I played sports for 18 years out of my life, and there were many rites of passage within there that I had to overcome physically and mentally, because I had to persevere through something that I could not possibly think that I could make it through. And you face that wall quite a bit in those physical challenges. But that is not a spiritual challenge. And that is not, it could be considered if you really want to stretch it. But the main focus of that is that physical rite of passage that you're claiming at that point. And I think that we are missing the spiritual rite of passage that you're discussing. And a lot of it has to do with masculinity and femininity. And I think that in today's world, you're a little bit older than me, but I think that our parents' generation, a lot of them, especially in the Middle Eastern culture, and especially in a lot of the Eastern cultures, have this toxic masculinity. Pardon me. Sorry.
It's all good, man.
But our families and our elders, they grew up in a way that had toxic masculinity, meaning that they felt that if they showed any sort of weakness or any femininity, that they were less than, they weren't a man. Yeah. And I do not believe that to be true. I think that in order to truly embody your full masculinity, you also have to embody the femininity that is within you. In the vice versa, in order to truly embody femininity and your divine feminine, you have to embody the masculinity within you.
No doubt.
Sorry, Eben. My sinus is just leaking right now. I'm gonna grab a
Do
tissue.
it, man. Do it. On that note, man, I think, it's so well put what you were saying. Robert Bly also talks about how over the last few centuries there has been this Hercules complex put on men, so that we feel as though if we're not victorious and we're not experiencing immense external success, then we're complete failures. And what does a man do if he's a failure? But the truth of masculinity is really found in man's descent into himself. All of the great mythological tales of manhood and masculinity discuss the descent into the underworld and descent into sorrow, grief, anxiety, fear, terror, and coming to terms with all of those things to emerge back onto the surface as a more complete man. And, that's part of so I guess to round it out, the rites of passage and our lacking of that really provided us with the structure of our spiritual life. That was the scaffolding by which we could gain an understanding and an awareness of our inner spiritual life that's happening, And, I always come back to Western civilization. I've had conversations with people now where maybe it's more acutely a first world issue. But it really comes down to materialism and consumerism and us being seduced into this idea that life is just a process of consumption and, what we can get. And how we can, we'll feel happy and we'll feel joy when that thing happens. When I get that job, when I get that car, when I get the house, then I'll feel happy. When I get all that money, that's when I'll feel happy. And this has created such an immense lacking in people, and such an immense amount of suffering. Because we're constantly seeking, once again, for the external validation of our worth in life, And something else that I think is so important about your story, man, that really that hit me is living your life in a vibration of joy, like going back and thinking about what are the moments in my life where I've experienced complete happiness and joy and just been in the complete flow of the universe. And it's when I'm with the people I love, cooking and enjoying the foods of my culture and of my ancestry and of my family. And, that sounds sort of abstract or it can sound abstract and obscure to most Americans because we think that we have to slog through life and we have to just like grind through the job that we hate because that's how we make money and that's how we climb the corporate ladder, and it's so backwards.
Yeah. I mean, the notion that I just have to work this 8-hour-a-day job so that I can go live my life is asinine to me.
Yeah.
It means that you genuinely do not care about your life. You genuinely do not care about the 8 hours a day, which means you spend 30% of your life sleeping and you spend the other 30% of it working. Yeah. You're working a 9 to 5.
In a very low vibration of hate, resentment, anger, frustration.
Right. And I believe that a lot of these systems were imposed on us. This matrix that we currently find ourselves in, we're in a financial, medical matrix that is, is our bubble. Yeah. That's what we know. That is what we are manipulated through. That is what we know. And you have the choice to either acquiesce or you have the choice to stand up and say, fuck you. Yeah. I'm not going to do it. Yeah. And then find your way out of that system. If you really think about it, there's not one major life event that you go through without going into debt. You cannot buy a house without getting into debt. You can't buy a car without getting into debt. You can't get an education without going into debt. You can't get anything, have a baby even.
Yeah, have a family.
Right, having debt. So everything is designed on a debt basis.
Yeah.
And if we look far, if you in an esoteric way, that is a form of manipulation, is constantly putting people in a state of fear. That is absolutely a form of manipulation. And if you want concrete examples, you start to go into the real financial system that runs the world, which is the Federal Reserve. If you really start to break it down and you want to go into the actual third dimensional reason that all this bullshit exists, then you start to look at where the money is coming from and where our debt is going to. And if you want to look at the esoteric, the transdimensional, the sort of, the frequency in which we are being kept, then that's a whole nother thing. We are being plagued with these weights that are literally illusions. They do not need to exist in order for the world to run, and they do not need to exist in order for you to feel fulfilled. Yes. And so, but in that third dimensional example, we're talking about a system that is a private bank that literally lends money to all of our major institutions and governments around the world. Yet people still cannot comprehend where and why there is definitive corruption within our systems.
Yeah.
And
it's really hard. It's really hard when you're slogging away, grinding it out in your 9 to 5 job, trying desperately to just put food on the table.
It's almost like they designed it that way. That's
exactly
crazy.
And to your point, to your earlier point, the universe relentlessly supports you. Yeah. And that goes both ways. So if you're living a life in a very low vibration, the universe says, oh, that's what you want. So let's perpetuate that. Let's give you more of that life. You live 30% of your life in a very low vibration. I guess that's what you want. So that's what we're going to do. You're going to live more of your life in that low vibration. But if you can find your way to climb that fucking ladder out of the matrix and you peek your head up and see the light through the blinds. And all of a sudden you start living a life of joy and a life of compassion and gratitude. The fucking whole thing starts to spiral the other way. And the universe starts to go, okay, let's fill your fucking life up with this, man. Let's fill your life up with more love, more positivity, more gratitude, more compassion. The fucking people around you are going to feel that. And it's just going to perpetuate that.
And
but we don't learn these things. We don't learn these. It takes I'm 32. I'm going to be 33 in 2 weeks. And when I think about that, I'm like, fuck, I'm pretty young. I'm pretty young to have come to a lot of the realizations that I have. So I feel very blessed, and I have a lot of gratitude for that. But really, all I can attest that to is from the time I was a little kid, following my instincts, following my intuition, going where the universe has taken me, And there's been a lot of darkness too.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there hasn't, I've had gut-wrenching, vomit-inducing lows.
Yeah.
Darkness that feels unimaginable in my life right now.
Yeah. And you would wish it upon your worst enemy.
Yeah.
I think that there's something to that too. I think, you put fire to something and you see whether it turns into, iron, or you see if it completely combusts.
Yeah.
And I think that is, it has to rely in a choice that you make. Because if we really take the gamut of human beings that have ever done anything, I mean, there's people that have lost their legs and limbs, and there's people that have watched their parents get shot. There's people that go through chronic illness. There's people that, just horribly traumatic things. And like, not to diminish anybody's tragedy, what I'm trying to say is that ultimately we all go through these immeasurable tragedies that you couldn't possibly compare how one person sees their own tragedy to how you see your own tragedy. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, you see people on both sides of the spectrum afterwards. You see people that take the tragedy and then they let it forge them into the strong iron person that they were, that chooses love, that chooses the higher path. Yeah. Or you see them break down and get weak and allow themselves to spiral into a negative space that is perpetuated exactly as you described by the universe, because that is what you are expelling.
Yes.
And so I feel that it is absolutely insane for any rational person to try and defend their ability to be held down. I think it is absolutely against their greatest purpose to give reasons why they shouldn't have their wildest dreams. They shouldn't have their true happiness, their success, their health, their, whatever it is. And if you bring that up to people, there has been programming so well done that if you bring up the mere fact that if somebody wants more in their life, that there is a way to attain it, they will fight with tooth and nail to tell you why they can't.
Yeah.
What the actual fuck? Like, tell me for 1 second how that makes any sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't at all. But it's like you said, man, if you come back to, because I do that, I have these thoughts frequently these days, and I have to, when I drop myself down into that vibration, that's sort of one of my gifts. I'm able to clear myself of my understanding of the world and drop myself back down, because I've been there. I've been in that situation, And you have to have compassion for people, because the conditioning and the programming is so masterful. It's so ingeniously constructed. And this world has been so ingeniously constructed around us. Going back to something we were talking about before I hit the record button, and why I think psychedelics are so vitally important, especially in this day and age. And I read this thing, Rudolf Steiner, this quote from Rudolf Steiner, and he said that with the immense amounts of electrical frequencies running through the airwaves in this stage of human existence, it's vitally important that people cultivate a spiritual inner life. Because before, it was much easier to be a human.
Yeah.
It was much easier before we had the entrenched technology and systems of civilization put into place. It was much easier and simpler to just be and to live. And it was you had a much clearer idea of where to go and what to do with your life. Now there's so much interference, and at the end of the day, we are electrical energy beings. We function on electricity and magnetism. Our hearts give off a massive electromagnetic frequency.
And that is physics. There's
right.
that's
not a conspiracy theory thing.
Right. So for those that genuinely try to dissuade themselves from truly understanding the nature of reality, which is that we are electromagnetic beings and that we exist on an electromagnetic plane, and that all things have an electromagnetic pulse, because that is what they are. Everything is like if you look at a neutron, it has positive and negative ions. That is exactly what it is. There's electricity.
And we're made up of billions of those.
Yes. So for those that don't understand that there is all of these frequencies, life can be defined just by understanding frequency and vibration. That is the core of life, the core essence of life. And it can be explained and understood in a cosine and sine wave. The entirety of life. And so when people, start to question this, and they start to really ask the right questions, they realize that all things are affecting us, including the radio, including the TV, including every single piece of electromagnetivity around us. That is taking place. And that is why for years, I read this book called Oneness, and it was a download that was written down by a person named Rashad. And I found it in the bookstore one day, and I was just like, I was blown away.
It called to you.
Yeah, it absolutely did. But I remember it took me like sometimes a month to read a chapter. I couldn't even read, like I had to sit there and download that for the next month, because it was so intellectually and spiritually dense. One of the things that I take from that is how we have the ability to really, change our energy and to protect our energy. We have the ability. So there's what's called a Merkaba, and it's essentially a 3-dimensional like Star of David.
Right.
Is what goes back into all of these other, conspiracies that would, we can talk about another time. But essentially, to give you the visual, it's a 3-dimensional Star of David, and so 2 triangles that create a box. And what the ancients knew was that in order to travel through dimensional planes, and that can be consciously or unconsciously, you have to create a very strong Merkaba, because you have to build that within yourself. You have to find your sanctuary. And when you build up that robust Merkaba, that energy shield, you can at least swat away the majority of the bullshit that is constantly being thrown at you in every conceivable direction. To relate back exactly what you said, that, you know, what Steiner said.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true. It is a worthwhile pursuit to create your energy shield that protects you from everything that is going on around you.
Absolutely, man.
I think
And, you know, I think that process has to begin with deprogramming yourself.
yeah.
And so what does that mean? And that's why I think psychedelics are so vitally important, is because psychedelics dissolve the illusions that you've come to believe and hold true around yourself. Because really, when we're living our lives, we're living our lives through a very specific lens of perception.
Yeah.
And we're living our lives through this filter of beliefs and ideas and boundaries and walls and things that have been put on us and things that we have come to believe are true about who we are and what we're supposed to be doing and what's right and what's wrong. And psychedelics dissolve that, and they obliterate all of that shit. You know? And so I was listening to I say this all the time. I come back to, I'm constantly listening to talks of people that I love and respect. Alan Watts, Ram Dass, Osho. This guy, Robert Bly, is one of my new favorites. Just his downloads on masculinity and the nature of manhood are just profound. And, you know, because we have to be students of life. We have to continue to be students. You know, I don't think you can ever, the moment you think you've got it all figured out is the moment you're totally fucked.
Right.
You know? But Ram Dass was talking about this thing of how fun it is to remember, how fun it is to forget and then remember. And I've had that exact experience through my practices of meditation and then my use of psychedelics, where I will completely forget things that I've carried with me my entire life. I'll fucking completely forget about it. And then one day I'll be doing the dishes and this thing will come back into my mind and I'll go, oh my God, how ridiculous was that idea? Like, in what realm of reality does that idea hold true at all? It's so silly. And it can be something as simple as the government system, the system of having a president and all of these, you know, and the absurdity of that entire hierarchy of power. The president, Congress, House of Representatives, the Senate, like, and these people and these old white dudes who have no interest in the well-being and health and survival of the average American citizen are put in positions to make decisions about what's best for us. It's like, this is absurd, you know, and that spans every aspect of my life lately, it seems like.
Yeah.
Because I find myself completely confronted with the hypocrisy and absurdity of the system that I've been brought up in.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and again, that's no fault of anyone's, because our parents were subjected to it, and their parents were subjected to it, and their parents and their parents, and so on. And we were led to believe all these certain things in the history of our species and where we come from and who we are and what we're doing here. And when you really break it down, it's like, what a fucking weird thing it is to be a human. You know, what a profound thing. Because you look around, there's nothing like a human. There's nothing like us. We stand on two legs. We have these incredible bodies that are magnificent creations that we could do anything with. We have these mind, this consciousness that is so vast, it's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
It's devastatingly incomprehensible, the vastness of the human experience. And we take it for granted. Like, we're all just like walking around doing jobs, like going to your fucking job as a financial advisor, like going to your job as this and that. And it's like, what?
You know,
What?
I laugh all the time at this because you've heard of the cosmic giggles.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, I have it all the time, dude.
And like sometimes I'll just be in my mind and I'll think about that, and I'll think about the absurdness that people are like, I'm definitely right and that person's a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
About literally regardless, it doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter what it is. The absurdness of the human experience has gotten to an all-time high now.
Yeah.
Where I genuinely see it as a joke. Like, yeah. I genuinely cannot comprehend it any other way.
Yeah. It's the cosmic joke, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. But that's exactly what you're describing.
You know, and we're so hung up on our righteousness and our individuality and our conceived idea of truth and what's right. And it's like, all right, are you paying attention? You know?
Do you not realize that like there's an infinite amount of truths in the world as well?
Yes.
That's the part that really gets me. And what I feel that people don't understand when this notion is brought up, because this exact notion is brought up across many different TV shows, many different podcasts, right? But I think that the hardest part to really get down and to understand from a point in which that it becomes productive is that, yes, all of that is true. And ultimately, the reason why you are here is, in my personal belief, may differ slightly from others, but I believe that it's to find love. It's to find, true love within yourself and then emanate that and vibrate on that frequency.
I love that, man.
And like ultimately that can manifest in so many different ways. For me, it's through food. For another person, it's through their art. For another person, it's through, fucking crunching numbers and doing shit. There's people that love that. There's people that fucking love that.
Yeah.
More power to them. I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But it's the power of choice. You have to choose what you are involved in. You have to choose how you respond. You have to make the decision within yourself how you came here to help the world. And ultimately, because you are helping the world, you are helping yourself. Everything can be looked at in that dynamic. Is a cyclical nature. Everything is cyclical. The torus is how we can understand the entirety of how the universe works. Everything falls into itself and then goes out and falls into itself. That is the true nature of the universe, of humanity. And if we don't take the true weight of our decisions, if we don't take responsibility for what we choose, then I don't believe we will ever know our true selves. I don't believe that we'll ever know what we truly want. And I think that it will decimate not only our minds and our lives, but it will decimate the world, because people can talk at this esoteric level. But in reality, we don't just live in the fourth, fifth, sixth dimension. We live on the third dimension as well.
Yeah.
People like you who find it that you are here to bridge that gap. You're here to take something esoteric and bring it down to the third dimension. And that is what a lot of people in our age bracket are really mean to do. That is what, in Oneness, she actually describes the children that were born in our era and the children that are born, afterwards, and the children that are born after that. and our future children and what they might
Mm. It's profound, man.
And it's great to be all the way up in the fucking with the angels and to constantly be nothing can faze me. I am all. I am, I'm here to be, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But then in reality, you're here on a third dimensional plane as well.
Yeah.
To live in just one, I think, is doing a disservice to your physical body, which you are literally consistently working in tandem with.
Yeah.
And everyone's a bit different. It doesn't mean that you have to get in the fucking ring and you have to beat some guy's ass in order to like get across the true nature of humanity. But maybe it means that you do a podcast and you discuss these topics so that you can bring something that's really esoteric and hard to grasp and then talk about it in a way that trickles down so that people that are searching for answers and searching for meaning, it clicks in their head, which then connects another dot, which then connects another dot,
Yeah.
and it leads them all the way up the ladder to where they're starting to have their own true understanding of their own life.
Yes.
And that is exactly what you've brought forth in your mission.
Mm.
That is exactly what I have brought forth in my mission. And those that follow their heart, it is exactly what they will bring forth in their mission.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we are experiencing an unprecedented state of consciousness shifting currently, in addition to the natural flow of the universe.
Yeah. No doubt, man. Fuck. I think that's a great place to end this thing, brother.
Absolutely.
Chris, I mean, thanks, dude. Thank you. So awesome. So awesome to hang out with you and spend time and have these conversations. And I really appreciate, your level of understanding and all the work that you're doing. It's so important.
Likewise, man. And I'm just so grateful that we have this friendship, and I'm looking forward to being in California and actually seeing you in person again.
Definitely, dude. I've got some things coming up that I think you can plug into as well.
Cool.
That we'll discuss. You want to let everybody know where they can follow you and find you?
Yeah, Instagram, it's the Herbal Chef. You'll see it with the blue check mark, and then everything is on theherbalchef.com as well.
Awesome.
I appreciate
brother. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys got as much out of that conversation as I did. As always, I greatly appreciate your support and your ear. If this episode really resonated with you, the greatest support you can give me is by rating it, reviewing it, and sharing it with your friends and family. Until next time, I'm Eben Britton, and this is the Ebb and Flow Podcast. I'm out of here. Peace.